Hey there. How are you feeling today? Wherever you are in the world, whatever time it is, I'm really glad you're here. If you'd like, drop your time and location in the comments. It's always incredible to see how far this little journey reaches. Tonight, you're about to travel back in time, not by decades or even centuries, but by hundreds of millions of years, to a world of giants, of thunderous footsteps, of creatures unlike anything we know today. In this video, we'll explore how dinosaurs rose to dominate the Earth, and how, in a blink of geologic time, they vanished. You'll learn about the planet they inherited, the science that helps us piece together their lives, and the mystery of their final day. You can watch the visuals, or simply close your eyes, relax, and let this ancient story carry you. Earth, 252 million years ago. The planet is a wasteland. Volcanic eruptions tear through the landscape, spewing toxic gases into the atmosphere. Acid rain falls from blood-red skies. The oceans are turning to poison, and 96% of all life on Earth is dying. This is the Great Dying, the most catastrophic mass extinction event our planet has ever witnessed. Yet from this hellscape of death and destruction, something extraordinary is about to emerge. Something that will dominate the Earth for the next 165 million years and capture human imagination like no other creatures before or since. The story of the dinosaurs doesn't begin with their triumph. It begins with their survival. While most life forms succumbed to the toxic chaos of the Permian-Triassic extinction, a small group of archosaurs, the ancestors of dinosaurs, managed to cling to existence in this hostile world. These weren't the massive, fearsome beasts we know from movies. They were modest creatures, no larger than a house cat, scraping out a living in the shadows of a planet trying to heal itself. But survival is just the beginning of their story. What happened next would reshape the entire history of life on Earth. The dinosaurs didn't just survive the Great Dying, they thrived in its aftermath. They evolved, adapted, and diversified at a rate that paleontologists are still trying to fully understand. Within just a few million years, these humble survivors would give rise to creatures so diverse and magnificent that they would rule every continent, dominate every ecosystem, and push the boundaries of what we thought possible for living organisms. Consider the sheer audacity of their success. From those small, unassuming ancestors emerged giants that stretched over 100 feet in length and weighed as much as 10 elephants. Predators evolved with teeth like railroad spikes and jaws powerful enough to crush a small car. Others took to the skies, becoming the first vertebrates to master powered flight. Some developed elaborate crests and frills that would make a peacock jealous, while others grew armor plating that could deflect the most vicious attacks. The rise of the dinosaurs wasn't just about size or ferocity. It was about innovation. These creatures pioneered biological technologies that wouldn't be seen again for millions of years. They developed sophisticated social behaviors, complex communication systems, and parenting strategies that rival those of modern mammals. Some species built elaborate nests and cared for their young, with a tenderness that contradicts every stereotype we have about these ancient beasts. But perhaps most remarkably, the dinosaurs succeeded because they were masters of adaptation. When the climate changed, they changed with it. When new predators emerged, they evolved new defenses. When food sources shifted, they developed new feeding strategies. For over 160 million years, they proved that life finds a way, no matter how challenging the circumstances. The world they inherited after the Great Dying was like a blank canvas, and the dinosaurs painted it with unprecedented diversity. The Triassic period, beginning around 252 million years ago, was their time of opportunity. The supercontinent Pangaea was slowly beginning to break apart, creating new landscapes and climate zones. Vast deserts stretched across the interior, while humid forests flourished along the coasts. It was in this patchwork of environments that the first true dinosaurs began to emerge. These early pioneers were still relatively small, but they possessed something that would prove crucial to their eventual dominance: efficiency. While other reptiles struggled with the changing climate, early dinosaurs developed more efficient respiratory systems, better temperature regulation, and more effective locomotion. They could move faster, breathe better, and adapt quicker than their competitors. These advantages might seem modest, but in the ruthless game of evolution, modest advantages compound over time. The first dinosaurs to truly capture our imagination appeared during the late Triassic, around 230 million years ago. Creatures like Eoraptor and Herrerasaurus were still relatively small, but they displayed the key characteristics that would define all dinosaurs: upright posture, specialized hip structures, and increasingly sophisticated bone architecture. These weren't just evolutionary experiments. They were the foundation upon which an empire would be built. As the Triassic gave way to the Jurassic period around 201 million years ago, the dinosaurs experienced another stroke of evolutionary fortune. Another mass extinction event, though not as severe as the Great Dying, cleared away many of their competitors. The large archosaurs that had dominated the Triassic landscapes disappeared, leaving ecological niches wide open for dinosaur colonization. It was during this transition that dinosaurs began their remarkable expansion into every available habitat. The Jurassic period, lasting from 201 to 145 million years ago, was when the dinosaurs truly hit their stride. This was the era of the giants, when creatures like Brachiosaurus and Diplodocus stretched their necks toward the sky and redefined what it meant to be large. The climate was warm and humid, with no polar ice caps and sea levels much higher than today. Vast forests of conifers, ferns and cycads covered the landscape, providing abundant food for the herbivorous giants that were becoming increasingly common. But size wasn't everything. The Jurassic also saw the emergence of some of the most sophisticated predators ever to walk the earth. Allosaurus, with its powerful jaws and razor-sharp teeth, perfected the art of hunting large prey. These weren't mindless killing machines. They were intelligent, adaptable predators that could work alone or in coordinated groups. Fossil evidence suggests they were capable of complex behaviors, including possibly caring for their wounded and sharing large kills. The diversity of Jurassic dinosaurs was staggering. Armored ankylosaurs developed into living tanks, their backs covered in bony plates and spikes that could deter even the most determined predators. Stegosaurus evolved its iconic backplates, which may have served for temperature regulation, display, or defense. Meanwhile, in the skies above, pterosaurs were reaching impressive sizes, though they wouldn't truly dominate the air until later periods. Perhaps most significantly, it was during the Jurassic that dinosaurs began to experiment with one of their most revolutionary innovations: flight. The first birds, descendants of small theropod dinosaurs, began to take to the skies. Archaeopteryx, discovered in German limestone quarries, represents one of the most important transitional fossils ever found, showing us exactly how dinosaurs made the leap from terrestrial to aerial life. This wasn't just an evolutionary curiosity, it was the beginning of a lineage that would eventually outlast all other dinosaurs and survive to the present day. The success of Jurassic dinosaurs wasn't just about individual species, it was about entire ecosystems. These creatures had learned to live together in complex communities with intricate predator-prey relationships, sophisticated social hierarchies, and interdependent food webs. Herds of sauropods migrated across continents, following seasonal food sources and leaving behind trackways that we can still study today. Their movements shaped the landscape, creating paths that other animals would follow for millions of years. The evidence for dinosaur intelligence and social behavior becomes increasingly compelling as we examine Jurassic fossils. Trackways show groups of dinosaurs moving together in coordinated fashion. Nesting sites reveal sophisticated parenting behaviors, with adults carefully arranging eggs and remaining with their young long after hatching. Some species appear to have engaged in elaborate courtship displays, using colorful plumage, distinctive calls, and ritualized behaviors to attract mates. But the dinosaurs' greatest achievement during the Jurassic was their mastery of scale. They didn't just get bigger, they got better at being big. Sauropods like Brachiosaurus developed specialized cardiovascular systems to pump blood up their enormous necks. Their bones became increasingly hollow and lightweight, reducing the energy cost of supporting such massive bodies. They evolved efficient digestive systems that could extract maximum nutrition from low-quality plant matter, allowing them to sustain their enormous bulk on a diet of leaves and ferns. The biomechanics of these giants continues to astound scientists today. How did a creature weighing 50 tons or more move without breaking its own bones? How did it breathe efficiently enough to fuel such a massive body? Recent research suggests that dinosaurs developed air sac systems similar to modern birds, allowing them to extract oxygen more efficiently than any reptile alive today. They were, in many ways, more advanced than the mammals that would eventually replace them. As the Jurassic period drew to a close, dinosaurs had established themselves as the undisputed masters of the Earth. They had colonized every continent, adapted to every climate, and filled every ecological niche, from the smallest feathered theropods to the largest sauropods. They had achieved a level of diversity and success that no other group of land animals has ever matched. They had survived one mass extinction and thrived in its aftermath, seemingly invincible in their dominance. The stage was set for even greater achievements in the Cretaceous period, when dinosaurs would reach their absolute peak of diversity and sophistication. New predators would emerge that would make Allosaurus look modest by comparison. Herbivores would develop defensive strategies that would put medieval armor to shame. And in the skies, pterosaurs would achieve sizes that would challenge the laws of physics. But for now, as the Jurassic faded into the Cretaceous, the dinosaurs stood triumphant. They had risen from the ashes of the Great Dying to become the most successful group of land animals in Earth's history. Their empire stretched from pole to pole, encompassing deserts and forests, mountains and plains. They had mastered land, sea and sky, and seemed destined to rule the Earth forever. The rise of the dinosaurs is more than just a story of biological success. It's a testament to the power of adaptation, the importance of timing, and the incredible resilience of life itself. In a universe that often seems hostile to living things, these remarkable creatures proved that with the right combination of innovation, persistence, and evolutionary luck, life can not only survive but flourish beyond our wildest dreams. And now we turn to the chapter that has captured the human imagination for millions of years: the rise and fall of the dinosaurs. These magnificent creatures ruled our planet for an extraordinary span of time, their story written in stone and fossil, their legacy etched into the very foundations of life itself. Picture, if you will, a world emerging from one of the most catastrophic events in Earth's history. The Permian-Triassic extinction, often called the Great Dying, had swept away nearly 90% of all life on our planet, some 252 million years ago. Volcanic eruptions had poisoned the atmosphere, oceans had turned acidic, and the global climate had shifted dramatically. Yet from this devastation, from this seemingly lifeless wasteland, something extraordinary was about to unfold. Among the survivors of this great catastrophe were small, unassuming creatures called archosaurs. These early reptiles, no larger than house cats, possessed something special, a combination of traits that would prove revolutionary in the changing world. They had developed more efficient respiratory systems, with air sacs that allowed for better oxygen extraction, crucial in an atmosphere still recovering from the extinction event. Their limbs were positioned more directly beneath their bodies, giving them advantages in locomotion that their sprawling contemporaries lacked. But perhaps most importantly, these early archosaurs displayed a remarkable adaptability. As the Triassic period progressed and the world slowly healed from its wounds, these creatures began to diversify in ways that would reshape the entire planet. Some remained small and nimble, while others grew larger and more robust. Some developed different feeding strategies, exploiting new ecological niches that opened up as ecosystems recovered and evolved. The climate of the Triassic was unlike anything we know today. There were no ice caps, no polar glaciers. Instead, the world was hot and humid, with vast deserts stretching across the supercontinent Pangaea. Seasonal monsoons brought flooding rains to some regions while leaving others parched for months. It was a world of extremes, and those creatures that could adapt to these changing conditions would inherit the Earth. Among the archosaurs, a particular lineage began to stand out. These were the earliest dinosaurs, and they possessed a suite of characteristics that would prove decisive in the evolutionary arms race that was unfolding. Their hip structure was unique, with a hip socket that was fully open, allowing their legs to extend directly beneath their bodies. This upright posture gave them significant advantages in both speed and endurance compared to their sprawling relatives. Their ankle joints were also distinctive, functioning like simple hinges rather than the complex arrangements seen in other reptiles. This seemingly minor detail actually provided enormous benefits. It made their locomotion more efficient and reduced the energy cost of movement. In a world where resources were still scarce following the Great Extinction, energy efficiency could mean the difference between survival and extinction. As the Triassic period progressed, these early dinosaurs began to diversify at an accelerating pace. Some remained small and bipedal, developing into swift predators that could chase down prey across the increasingly varied landscapes. Others grew larger and more robust, eventually transitioning to four-legged stances that could support greater body weights. The stage was being set for one of the most remarkable evolutionary radiations in Earth's history. The transition from the Triassic to the Jurassic period, approximately 201 million years ago, brought another mass extinction event. Volcanic activity associated with the breakup of Pangaea filled the atmosphere with carbon dioxide and toxic gases, causing global warming and ocean acidification. Many of the archosaurs that had competed with dinosaurs for dominance suddenly vanished, leaving ecological niches wide open for exploitation. The dinosaurs, with their superior respiratory systems and efficient locomotion, were perfectly positioned to capitalize on this opportunity. They rapidly expanded into the ecological roles left vacant by the extinction, and the Jurassic period became their golden age. This was the time when dinosaurs truly came into their own, diversifying into forms that would capture the human imagination millions of years later. The long-necked sauropods emerged during this period, growing to sizes that still astound us today. Creatures like Brachiosaurus and Diplodocus stretched their necks toward the canopy, browsing on vegetation that other herbivores couldn't reach. Their enormous size was made possible by their unique bone structure. Many of their bones were hollow, filled with air sacs that reduced weight while maintaining strength. It was an elegant solution to the engineering challenges of supporting such massive bodies. But the Jurassic wasn't just about gentle giants. Fearsome predators evolved alongside the herbivores, engaging in an evolutionary arms race that pushed both groups to new extremes. Allosaurus, with its powerful jaws and razor-sharp teeth, stalked the forests and plains. Its hunting strategies were sophisticated, possibly involving pack behavior and coordinated attacks on prey much larger than itself. Perhaps most remarkably, It was during the Jurassic that dinosaurs achieved something no large animal had ever accomplished before. They took to the skies. The evolution of flight represents one of the most significant developments in the history of life on Earth. Feathers, which had initially evolved for insulation and display, were gradually modified for flight. The first birds, like Archaeopteryx, retained many dinosaurian characteristics: teeth, claws, and long bony tails. But they had crossed a threshold that would open up entirely new possibilities for vertebrate life. The biomechanics of dinosaur locomotion were truly extraordinary. Computer models based on fossil evidence suggest that some dinosaurs could run at speeds exceeding 40 miles per hour. Their stride patterns, preserved in fossil trackways, reveal complex gaits that maximized efficiency while minimizing energy expenditure. Some species developed elaborate display structures, crests, frills, and colorful plumage that suggest sophisticated social behaviors and communication systems. Evidence from fossil bone beds indicates that many dinosaur species were highly social, living in herds and possibly engaging in complex migratory patterns. The famous dinosaur trackways found in various locations around the world show parallel paths of multiple individuals, suggesting coordinated group movement across vast distances. These migrations may have been driven by seasonal changes in food availability or breeding requirements. The diversity of dinosaur feeding strategies was remarkable. Some developed batteries of hundreds of tiny teeth for processing plant material, while others evolved long, narrow snouts for fishing in rivers and lakes. Certain species developed powerful beaks for cracking nuts and seeds, while others possessed claws specialized for digging up roots and tubers. This diversification allowed dinosaurs to exploit virtually every available ecological niche. By the end of the Jurassic period, dinosaurs had achieved something unprecedented in the history of life. They had become the dominant large animals on every continent. From the polar regions to the equator, from coastal plains to mountain highlands, dinosaurs had adapted to every major terrestrial environment. Their success was so complete that they would continue to dominate terrestrial ecosystems for another 80 million years. The legacy of their Jurassic radiation was profound. They had established the basic body plans and ecological strategies that would carry them through the Cretaceous period, when they would achieve even greater diversity and specialization. The foundations laid during this golden age of dinosaur evolution would prove remarkably resilient, allowing these magnificent creatures to weather climate changes, continental drift, and the rise and fall of numerous other species. As we drift towards sleep, we can marvel at this extraordinary chapter in life's story. The dinosaurs of the Jurassic had transformed from small, humble survivors into the masters of their world. They had proven that evolution, given time and opportunity, could produce forms of life so successful and diverse that they would dominate the planet for longer than any other group of large animals before or since. Their story was far from over, but already they had achieved something magnificent. They had shown that life, even after the most devastating setbacks, could not only recover, but flourish in ways that exceeded all previous limits. The Cretaceous period dawned 145 million years ago, marking the beginning of dinosaurs' final and most spectacular chapter. This wasn't just another geological era, it was the stage upon which the most dramatic evolutionary innovations would unfold, where giants would reach their absolute zenith, and where the seeds of both triumph and catastrophe would be sown with equal measure. Picture the Earth as it existed then, a world almost unrecognizable from our modern planet. Sea levels had risen to their highest point in Earth's history, creating vast inland seas that split continents and transformed global climate patterns. The supercontinent Pangaea had continued its inexorable breakup, with the Atlantic Ocean widening and new mountain ranges thrusting skyward. This geographic upheaval created countless new ecological niches. isolated populations that would evolve in spectacular directions and set the stage for an explosion of diversity that would make the Jurassic look almost conservative by comparison. The climate during the early Cretaceous was a greenhouse world of almost tropical luxury. There were no ice caps, no frozen poles, just a planet wrapped in warmth and humidity from pole to pole. Palm trees grew in Alaska, crocodiles basked in Arctic waters, and the global temperature averaged perhaps 15 degrees warmer than today. This thermal paradise created conditions that would allow dinosaurs to colonize every continent, from the equatorial rainforests to the polar forests that thrived under the midnight sun. But perhaps the most revolutionary change wasn't in geography or climate, it was botanical. The Cretaceous witnessed the rise of flowering plants, the angiosperms, and their impact on dinosaur evolution cannot be overstated. These weren't just new food sources, they were ecosystem engineers that would reshape the entire structure of terrestrial life. Flowers brought color to a world that had been dominated by the muted greens and browns of ferns and conifers. More importantly, they brought efficiency, nutritional density, and seasonal abundance that would fuel the evolution of entirely new types of herbivorous dinosaurs. The hadrosaurids, or duck-billed dinosaurs, emerged as perhaps the most successful large herbivores the world had ever seen. These weren't the simple browsers of earlier eras. They were sophisticated feeding machines equipped with dental batteries containing hundreds of teeth arranged in precise grinding surfaces. A single hadrosaurid skull might contain over 1,000 individual teeth, constantly replacing themselves in conveyor belt fashion to maintain peak efficiency. This dental sophistication allowed them to process the tough, fibrous flowering plants with unprecedented effectiveness, converting cellulose into the energy needed to fuel their massive bodies. But the hadrosaurids weren't content with simply being efficient eating machines. They evolved into some of the most socially complex dinosaurs ever discovered. Their fossilized trackways reveal herds numbering in the thousands, vast migrations that would have rivaled the great mammalian migrations of the African savanna. These weren't random aggregations, but organized societies with clear social hierarchies, protective behaviors, and sophisticated communication systems. The hollow crests of lambeosaurine hadrosaurs weren't just ornamental, they were acoustic instruments of remarkable complexity. Each species possessed a uniquely shaped crest that functioned as a resonating chamber, capable of producing distinct calls that could travel for miles across the Cretaceous landscape. Parasaurolophus could produce deep, haunting notes reminiscent of a trombone, while Corythosaurus generated higher-pitched calls that might have sounded like massive trumpets. These weren't simple alarm calls, but complex acoustic signatures that allowed species recognition, individual identification, and coordination of group movements across vast distances. The ceratopsians, the horned dinosaurs, represented another pinnacle of Cretaceous evolution. Triceratops, with its iconic three-horned face and massive frill, has become synonymous with dinosaur diversity, but it was merely the culmination of a radiation that produced some of the most bizarre and beautiful creatures in Earth's history. Styracosaurus bristled with spikes like a living fortress. Cosmoceratops sported 15 horns arranged in elaborate patterns, and Diabloceratops earned its devilish name from its particularly intimidating facial armament. These elaborate displays weren't just for show. They were the result of intense sexual selection pressures combined with sophisticated social behaviors. Like the antlers of modern deer or the plumage of peacocks, ceratopsian frills and horns likely served dual functions, intimidating rivals and attracting mates. The largest specimens would have been walking advertisements of genetic fitness, their massive headgear requiring enormous energy investments that only the healthiest individuals could afford. Recent discoveries have revealed that many ceratopsians lived in vast herds, their fossilized bone beds containing hundreds of individuals of all ages. These weren't mass death assemblages, but evidence of complex social structures that persisted across multiple generations. Young ceratopsians show evidence of extended parental care, with juveniles remaining with their herds for years while their elaborate headgear slowly developed. This suggests social learning, cultural transmission of knowledge, and perhaps even primitive forms of what we might recognize as dinosaur culture. The ankylosaurs, the armored tanks of the Cretaceous, pushed defensive evolution to its absolute limits. Ankylosaurus itself was a walking fortress, weighing up to 6 tons, its back covered in bony plates and spikes that would have made it nearly invulnerable to attack. But the true innovation wasn't just passive armor. It was the tail club, a massive bony mace that could deliver devastating blows with the force of a sledgehammer. Biomechanical studies suggest these tail clubs could generate enough force to shatter the bones of even the largest predators, turning herbivorous dinosaurs into formidable weapons platforms. Yet perhaps the most significant evolutionary development of the Cretaceous was the continued refinement of predatory dinosaurs. The tyrannosaurs reached their apex with Tyrannosaurus rex, a predator so perfectly adapted to its role that it has become the archetypal dinosaur in popular imagination. But T-Rex wasn't just large, it was sophisticated in ways that continue to astonish researchers. Its bite force exceeded 12,000 pounds per square inch, enough to crush the spine of a triceratops with a single bite. Its teeth were serrated like steak knives, designed not just to puncture but to slice through flesh and bone with surgical precision. The sensory capabilities of T-Rex were equally impressive. Its brain was proportionally larger than most dinosaurs, with enlarged regions devoted to smell and vision. Its sense of smell was likely superior to that of modern vultures, capable of detecting carrion from miles away. Its forward-facing eyes provided binocular vision with depth perception that would have made it a formidable hunter. Recent studies suggest it could see farther and more clearly than modern eagles, spotting prey from distances that would have given it significant tactical advantages. But T-Rex wasn't the only apex predator of the Cretaceous. Giganotosaurus in South America grew even larger, reaching lengths of up to 46 feet and potentially outweighing T-Rex by several tons. Carcharodontosaurus in Africa possessed teeth like those of great white sharks, earning its name as the shark-toothed lizard. These predators weren't just randomly distributed giants. They were the products of continental isolation, evolving in parallel to fill similar ecological roles on different continents. The smaller predators were equally remarkable in their own ways. The dromaeosaurs, including the famous velociraptor, weren't the human-sized monsters of Hollywood, but were nonetheless incredibly sophisticated hunters. Their sickle-shaped claws weren't just for slashing, but were precision instruments capable of maintaining grip on struggling prey. Their intelligence was remarkable for reptiles, with brain-to-body ratios that approached those of modern birds. They likely hunted in coordinated packs, using complex strategies to bring down prey much larger than themselves. The discovery of feathered dinosaurs in China has revolutionized our understanding of Cretaceous predators. Yutyrannus, a tyrannosaur the size of a small T-Rex, was covered in primitive feathers that likely served for insulation and display. The Rhizinosaurus, despite its massive claws, was actually a plant eater, whose feathers created one of the most bizarre appearances in dinosaur history. These discoveries confirmed that the line between dinosaurs and birds wasn't a sharp boundary, but a gradual transition that began much earlier than previously thought. The Cretaceous also witnessed the continued evolution of flight, with pterosaurs reaching sizes that dwarf any flying creature before or since. Quetzalcoatlus stood as tall as a giraffe and possessed a wingspan that exceeded 35 feet, making it the largest flying animal in Earth's history. These weren't just oversized pterodactyls, but sophisticated flying machines with hollow bones, efficient flight muscles, and navigation capabilities that allowed them to soar across continents. Meanwhile, true birds were diversifying rapidly, filling niches from tiny insectivores to large flightless predators. Hesperornis was a 6-foot-long diving bird with teeth, perfectly adapted for life in the inland seas. Ichthyornis was a gull-sized fishing bird that represents one of the closest links between dinosaurs and modern birds. These early birds weren't just evolutionary experiments, but successful animals that would survive the coming catastrophe that would claim their larger relatives. The marine realm during the Cretaceous was equally spectacular, though dominated by reptiles rather than dinosaurs. Mosasaurs, marine lizards that grew to lengths exceeding 50 feet, ruled the seas with the authority of modern killer whales. Plesiosaurs reached their peak diversity, ranging from long-necked browsers to massive short-necked predators like Leedsichthys that could challenge even the largest sharks. These marine reptiles weren't just aquatic dinosaurs, but represented entirely separate radiations that paralleled dinosaur success in terrestrial environments. The Cretaceous period lasted for nearly 80 million years, longer than the entire Cenozoic era that followed. During this vast span of time, dinosaurs continued to evolve, adapt, and diversify in ways that filled virtually every available ecological niche. They ranged from tiny insectivores no larger than sparrows to massive sauropods that reached lengths of over 100 feet. They included specialized fish eaters, egg thieves, bone crushers, and browsers adapted to every conceivable plant type. But perhaps most remarkably, they had begun to approach levels of intelligence and social complexity that wouldn't be seen again until the rise of mammals millions of years later. Evidence suggests that some dinosaurs engaged in complex parental care, with adults bringing food to their young for extended periods. Others show evidence of play behavior, learning, and even primitive tool use. The large-brained troodontids possessed intelligence levels that may have approached those of modern birds, suggesting that given more time, dinosaurs might have evolved genuine intelligence. The success of Cretaceous dinosaurs wasn't just measured in size or diversity, but in their complete domination of terrestrial ecosystems. They had evolved solutions to every environmental challenge, from the driest deserts to the wettest swamps, from tropical rainforests to polar woodlands. They had developed sophisticated social behaviors, complex communication systems, and physiological adaptations that allowed them to thrive in conditions that would challenge even modern animals. Their respiratory systems had reached peak efficiency, with air sacs that allowed unidirectional airflow through their lungs, providing oxygen extraction capabilities that exceeded those of mammals. Their circulatory systems had evolved 4-chambered hearts that could maintain high blood pressure and rapid circulation even in the largest species. Their digestive systems had developed specialized compartments for fermenting plant material, allowing them to extract maximum nutrition from even the toughest vegetation. Yet even as dinosaurs reached these heights of evolutionary success, the conditions that had made their dominance possible were beginning to change. The supercontinent breakup was accelerating, creating new ocean basins and altering global circulation patterns. Volcanic activity was increasing, particularly in what would become India, where massive lava flows were beginning to pour across the landscape. Climate was becoming more variable, with seasonal extremes becoming more pronounced and regional differences becoming more marked. The very success of dinosaurs may have contributed to their vulnerability. Their large size and high metabolic demands made them dependent on stable environmental conditions and abundant food resources. Their specialized adaptations, while perfect for the conditions in which they evolved, might have made them less flexible when faced with rapid environmental change. Their dominance had eliminated many of the smaller, more generalized species that might have served as evolutionary stepping stones to new adaptive zones. The stage was being set for the final act of the dinosaur drama, though the actors themselves remained blissfully unaware of the approaching catastrophe. The Cretaceous world was a paradise of warmth, abundance, and evolutionary opportunity, a planet where giants walked and the impossible seemed routine. Dinosaurs had achieved a level of success that was unprecedented in Earth's history, a dominance so complete that it seemed as eternal as the mountains themselves. But evolution, like history, has a way of humbling even the most successful lineages. The very forces that had driven dinosaur evolution for over 160 million years were about to face their ultimate test, a challenge so severe that it would reshape the entire fabric of life on Earth. The rise of the dinosaurs was complete, their success absolute, their dominance unchallenged. What followed would prove that in the grand theatre of evolution, even the most successful performers must eventually exit the stage. Looking at the cosmic journey we've explored together, from the birth of the universe to the gravity ballet of celestial bodies, we arrive at the fourth movement of our dinosaur saga, the age of decline and the approaching end of an era. The late Cretaceous period, roughly 100 to 66 million years ago, represented both the pinnacle and the twilight of dinosaur dominance. These ancient rulers had achieved a level of diversity and specialization that would never be equaled again. Yet beneath this apparent success, the seeds of their downfall were already taking root in ways both subtle and profound. By this time, the continents had continued their slow dance across the planet's surface, approaching configurations more familiar to us today. The Atlantic Ocean had widened considerably, separating North America from Europe and South America from Africa. This geographic isolation created distinct evolutionary pathways on different continents, leading to remarkable regional variations in dinosaur populations. In North America, the great inland sea that had divided the continent for millions of years began its final retreat, fundamentally altering climate patterns and ecosystems. The dinosaurs of this period were marvels of evolutionary refinement. The hadrosaurs, or duck-billed dinosaurs, had developed increasingly sophisticated dental batteries, rows upon rows of grinding teeth that could process the toughest plant materials with remarkable efficiency. These creatures lived in vast herds that migrated across changing landscapes, their hollow crests serving as resonating chambers for long-distance communication. The haunting calls of these herds would have echoed across late Cretaceous plains, like the songs of some prehistoric orchestra. Meanwhile, the ceratopsians reached new heights of elaboration. Triceratops, with its massive three-horned skull and elaborate neck frill, represented the culmination of millions of years of evolutionary arms races. These creatures were living fortresses, their skulls accounting for nearly a third of their total body length. Yet their impressive armor was more than defensive. The intricate patterns of horns and frills served as species identification markers and displays of individual fitness, turning each encounter into a visual conversation about identity and status. The predators of this age had evolved to match their increasingly well-defended prey. Tyrannosaurus rex, perhaps the most iconic of all dinosaurs, embodied the pinnacle of large predator evolution. Standing nearly 13 feet tall at the hips and stretching over 40 feet from snout to tail, these apex hunters possessed bone-crushing jaws capable of exerting forces exceeding 12,000 pounds per square inch. Their massive heads were supported by powerful necks and balanced by equally impressive tails, creating a precision-engineered killing machine. Yet T-Rex was far from a mindless brute. Recent discoveries have revealed that tyrannosaurs possessed relatively large brains for their body size, suggesting sophisticated hunting strategies and complex social behaviors. Evidence points to possible pack hunting among some tyrannosaur species, with individuals coordinating their attacks to bring down prey far larger than any single predator could handle alone. Their keen senses, including exceptional vision and hearing, made them formidable hunters in both daylight and darkness. The skies above these terrestrial giants were dominated by the largest flying creatures ever to exist. Quetzalcoatlus, with a wingspan approaching 35 feet, soared over late Cretaceous landscapes like a feathered aircraft. These agedarchid pterosaurs were no mere scavengers. They were active hunters, using their massive beaks to pluck fish from inland waters and small dinosaurs from the ground. Their hollow bones and sophisticated flight membranes represented the ultimate expression of vertebrate flight before the evolution of modern birds. In the oceans, marine reptiles had reached their own evolutionary zenith. Mosasaurs, essentially giant marine lizards, patrolled Cretaceous seas with the authority of oceanic tyrants. The largest species, such as Mosasaurus hoffmanni, stretched over 50 feet in length and possessed jaws lined with recurved teeth designed for grasping struggling prey. These creatures were so dominant that they drove many other marine reptile groups to extinction simply through competition. The plant life of the late Cretaceous painted these landscapes in colors and forms that would have seemed both familiar and alien to modern eyes. Flowering plants had completed their revolution, transforming terrestrial ecosystems with their efficient reproduction strategies and diverse forms. Oak, maple, and magnolia trees created forests that would have looked remarkably modern, while palms and cycads added tropical elements to the mix. Yet beneath this familiar canopy, dinosaurs continued their ancient rhythms, unaware that their world was about to change forever. Climate during this period was generally warm and humid, with temperatures significantly higher than today. There were no ice caps at the poles, and tropical conditions extended far into what are now temperate regions. This greenhouse world supported lush vegetation across vast areas, providing abundant food for the enormous herbivorous dinosaurs that had evolved to exploit these rich resources. However, this apparent stability masked growing environmental pressures. Volcanic activity was increasing across the globe, with massive eruptions in what is now India creating the Deccan Traps, layer upon layer of basaltic lava that would eventually cover an area larger than modern France. These eruptions released enormous quantities of carbon dioxide and sulfur compounds into the atmosphere, gradually altering global climate patterns. The effects were subtle at first, but they represented the beginning of environmental changes that would challenge even the most adaptable dinosaur species. Sea levels, which had been rising throughout much of the Cretaceous, began to fluctuate more dramatically. The retreat of the Western Interior Seaway in North America left behind vast coastal plains, but it also disrupted oceanic circulation patterns that had remained stable for millions of years. These changes affected weather patterns across the globe, creating new challenges for dinosaur populations that had evolved under different conditions. The diversity of dinosaur species during this period was staggering. In North America alone, paleontologists have identified dozens of distinct species living in the final 10 million years of the Cretaceous. Each ecological niche seemed to have its own specialized dinosaur, from the massive, long-necked sauropods that still roamed southern continents to the armored ankylosaurs that resembled living tanks. Small, agile theropods filled roles as generalist predators, while larger species like Albertosaurus and Daspletosaurus provided competition for the mighty T-Rex. Yet this very specialization, which had allowed dinosaurs to dominate virtually every terrestrial ecosystem, also made them vulnerable to rapid environmental change. Species that had evolved over millions of years to exploit specific food sources or environmental conditions found themselves increasingly challenged as those conditions began to shift. The highly specialized dental batteries of hadrosaurs, perfect for processing late Cretaceous vegetation, might have been less effective if plant communities changed rapidly. The massive body sizes that had been advantageous during times of abundant resources could become liabilities when food became scarce. The intricate food webs that had supported dinosaur diversity for so long were beginning to show signs of strain. The relationships between predator and prey, between herbivore and plant, between different competing species, all of these connections that had evolved over millions of years were being tested by changing environmental conditions. Some species proved remarkably adaptable, but others, particularly those with the most specialized lifestyles, began to face increasing pressure. As we examine the final chapters of the dinosaur story, we see creatures that had achieved evolutionary perfection within their specific niches. They had solved the challenges of their time with elegant biological solutions, sophisticated social structures, remarkable physiological adaptations, and behavioral strategies that had served them well for millions of years. Yet they were about to face a challenge unlike any their lineage had encountered before, one that would test not just individual species, but the entire foundation of life on Earth. The stage was set for one of the most dramatic transitions in our planet's history. The dinosaurs, masters of the Mesozoic world, stood at the threshold of an event that would reshape life on Earth forever. Their story was about to take a turn that would echo through geological time, marking the end of an era and the beginning of a new chapter in the ongoing evolution of life on our planet. The winds of change that swept through the Mesozoic had been subtle at first, like whispers in the ancient atmosphere. For over 160 million years, dinosaurs had ruled with an authority that seemed eternal, their dominance so complete that the very concept of their absence would have been inconceivable. Yet beneath this veneer of permanence, forces were stirring that would ultimately challenge even the most successful evolutionary dynasty in Earth's history. The late Cretaceous period, roughly 100 to 66 million years ago, represented both the pinnacle and the twilight of the dinosaur age. This was an era of superlatives, where evolution seemed to be experimenting with the very limits of what life could achieve. The massive titanosaurs stretched their necks toward canopies that towered over landscapes more lush and diverse than anything seen before or since. Predators like Tyrannosaurus rex and Giganotosaurus embodied the apex of terrestrial hunting prowess, their bone-crushing jaws and razor-sharp teeth marking them as perhaps the most formidable land predators ever to walk the Earth. But the late Cretaceous was also a time of environmental upheaval, though it unfolded on timescales that would have been imperceptible to any individual dinosaur. The supercontinent Pangaea had long since fragmented, and the drifting continents were approaching configurations that would begin to resemble the modern world. This continental drift wasn't merely a geological curiosity, it was reshaping ocean currents, altering weather patterns, and fragmenting once continuous habitats into isolated islands of ecosystem diversity. The rising sea levels of the late Cretaceous created a world dramatically different from the one that had nurtured the first dinosaurs. Vast inland seas stretched across what would become North America, Europe, and other continents, creating new marine environments while simultaneously reducing the total area of terrestrial habitat. For creatures that had evolved to dominate the land, this gradual drowning of familiar territories presented an unprecedented challenge. Perhaps more ominously, the late Cretaceous witnessed an increase in volcanic activity that would have profound implications for global climate stability. The Deccan Traps in what is now India were beginning to release massive quantities of lava, ash, and volcanic gases into the atmosphere. These eruptions weren't brief, explosive events, but rather sustained outpourings that continued for hundreds of thousands of years, gradually altering atmospheric composition and global temperature patterns. The The climate itself was becoming increasingly unstable, swinging between periods of extreme warmth and relative cooling in cycles that challenged the evolutionary adaptations dinosaurs had developed over millions of years. Many dinosaur species had become highly specialized for specific environmental conditions, their success intimately tied to particular temperature ranges, vegetation types, and ecological relationships. As these conditions began to shift more rapidly than ever before, the very specializations that had made dinosaurs so successful began to work against them. The plant communities that formed the foundation of dinosaur ecosystems were also undergoing dramatic transformation. The rise of flowering plants, or angiosperms, had revolutionized terrestrial vegetation during the Cretaceous. While this botanical revolution had initially created new opportunities for herbivorous dinosaurs, it also introduced new forms of chemical defense in plants, altered nutritional profiles, and changed the fundamental structure of food webs that had remained relatively stable for tens of millions of years. Competition was intensifying from unexpected quarters. Small mammals, previously relegated to nocturnal niches and rarely growing larger than modern rats, were beginning to diversify and explore new ecological opportunities. While they posed no direct threat to adult dinosaurs, these furry competitors were increasingly successful at exploiting resources that had once been the exclusive domain of smaller dinosaur species. Birds, themselves descendants of dinosaurs, were rapidly diversifying and occupying aerial niches with unprecedented efficiency. The marine realm, too, was experiencing its own crisis. The great marine reptiles that had ruled the oceans alongside their terrestrial dinosaur cousins were facing their own environmental pressures. Changing ocean chemistry, temperature fluctuations, and the reorganization of marine food webs were challenging creatures that had seemed as permanent as the dinosaurs themselves. Perhaps most significantly, the intricate web of ecological relationships that had sustained dinosaur dominance was beginning to unravel. The late Cretaceous ecosystems were marvels of complexity, with elaborate predator-prey relationships, pollination networks, and nutrient cycling systems that had evolved over millions of years. As environmental conditions shifted, these delicate balances became increasingly difficult to maintain. The loss of key species could trigger cascading effects throughout entire ecosystems, and the highly specialized nature of many late Cretaceous dinosaurs made them particularly vulnerable to such disruptions. The great herbivorous dinosaurs, despite their impressive size and defensive capabilities, were finding it increasingly difficult to locate the specific types of vegetation their digestive systems had evolved to process. Climate change was altering the distribution of plant species, creating mismatches between where dinosaurs could live and where their preferred food sources could grow. For creatures that required enormous quantities of plant matter each day, even small changes in vegetation availability could have profound consequences. Predatory dinosaurs faced their own challenges, as the herbivore populations they depended upon began to fluctuate unpredictably. The carefully balanced predator-prey relationships that had maintained ecosystem stability for millions of years were becoming increasingly strained. Some predator species, having evolved to hunt specific types of prey, found themselves unable to adapt quickly enough to changing prey availability. Reproductive success, the ultimate measure of evolutionary fitness, was becoming more difficult to achieve. Many dinosaur species had evolved elaborate courtship behaviors, nesting requirements, and parental care strategies that depended on stable environmental conditions. As temperatures fluctuated, seasonal patterns shifted, and habitat availability changed, these complex reproductive strategies became increasingly unreliable. The fossil record from the late Cretaceous reveals subtle but significant changes in dinosaur diversity and abundance. While new species continued to evolve, the rate of extinction was gradually increasing, and the geographic ranges of many species were beginning to contract. What had once been widespread, successful species were becoming increasingly restricted to smaller areas of suitable habitat. Ocean acidification, caused by increased atmospheric carbon dioxide from volcanic activity, was beginning to affect the marine food webs that many coastal dinosaur communities depended upon. The great marine reptiles that had shared the Mesozoic seas with dinosaurs were among the first to show signs of stress, their populations declining as the ocean chemistry shifted beyond their tolerance limits. The late Cretaceous world was also experiencing increased frequency of extreme weather events. Powerful storms, prolonged droughts, and sudden temperature swings created conditions that challenged even the most adaptable dinosaur species. While individual dinosaurs might survive such events, the cumulative effect on populations was becoming increasingly significant. Perhaps most troubling of all, the environmental changes of the late Cretaceous were not isolated events, but part of interconnected global systems that amplified each other's effects. Volcanic activity contributed to climate change, which altered ocean currents, which affected weather patterns, which influenced vegetation distribution, which impacted herbivore populations, which affected predator communities in an endless cascade of environmental disruption. The stage was being set for a crisis unlike any the dinosaurs had faced before. The very success that had made them the dominant life forms on Earth had also made them dependent on the continuation of the environmental conditions that had fostered their rise. As those conditions began to change at an unprecedented rate, the dinosaur dynasty found itself facing challenges that would test the limits of evolutionary adaptation. Yet even as these mounting pressures accumulated, life continued with an almost surreal normalcy. Triceratops still grazed in vast herds across the late Cretaceous landscapes, their three-horned skulls and massive frills as impressive as ever. Tyrannosaurus rex continued its reign as the apex predator, its bone-crushing bite and keen senses making it a formidable hunter. Hadrosaurs still filled the air with their haunting calls, their sophisticated social structures and complex communication systems functioning as effectively as they had for millions of years. The great pterosaurs still soared overhead, their massive wings carrying them across skies that seemed as vast and welcoming as ever. In the oceans, mosasaurs and plesiosaurs continued their ancient marine hunts, their streamlined bodies perfectly adapted for life in the water. The rhythms of life that had sustained the dinosaur age for over 150 million years continued unabated, even as the foundations of that world were quietly shifting beneath them. This was the paradox of the late Cretaceous, a time of unprecedented dinosaur diversity and evolutionary achievement, yet also a time when the very success of these magnificent creatures was beginning to work against them. The specializations that had made them so successful were becoming liabilities in a rapidly changing world. The ecological relationships that had sustained them were becoming increasingly fragile. The environmental stability that had allowed them to flourish was giving way to a new era of uncertainty and change. As the late Cretaceous drew toward its close, the dinosaurs remained the undisputed masters of their world, their dominance seemingly as secure as ever. Yet beneath the surface of this apparent stability, forces were gathering that would soon challenge not just individual species or ecosystems, but the very foundations of life on Earth. The age of dinosaurs was approaching its most crucial test, and the outcome would determine not just the fate of these magnificent creatures, but the entire trajectory of life's future evolution on our planet. The late Cretaceous period reached its zenith around 100 million years ago, representing the absolute peak of dinosaur dominance. This was their golden age, when these magnificent creatures had refined their evolutionary strategies to near perfection. The world they inhabited was a paradise of warmth and abundance, with sea levels so high that vast inland seas divided continents and created countless islands and archipelagos. In this greenhouse world, there were no polar ice caps, no frozen wastelands, just a planet-spanning garden where life flourished in every conceivable niche. The dinosaurs of this era were not the primitive, lumbering beasts of popular imagination, but sophisticated, highly specialized organisms that had been honed by over 150 million years of evolution. The great sauropods had reached their most impressive forms. Argentinosaurus and Patagoteton stretched over 100 feet in length, their necks alone longer than most modern whales. These gentle giants moved in herds across the flowering plains, their massive footsteps creating pathways that smaller animals would follow for generations. Their feeding strategies were marvels of efficiency, with specialized teeth for stripping vegetation and incredibly long necks that allowed them to browse from treetops without expending energy to rear up on their hind legs. The predators of this age were equally impressive, having evolved into apex hunters that dominated their ecosystems with ruthless efficiency. Tyrannosaurus rex stalked the northern continents, its massive skull packed with sensory equipment that would make a modern shark envious. Its forward-facing eyes provided binocular vision for precise depth perception, while its olfactory bulbs were enormous, giving it a sense of smell that could detect carrion from miles away. But T-Rex was not alone in its dominance. In South America, Giganotosaurus and Maposaurus hunted in coordinated packs, bringing down even the largest sauropods through teamwork and strategy. These predators had evolved sophisticated hunting techniques, using their intelligence and social bonds to overcome prey that no single individual could hope to defeat. The skies belonged to the pterosaurs, which had reached their evolutionary peak during this period. Quetzalcoatlus soared on wings that spanned over 35 feet, making it one of the largest flying animals ever to exist. These magnificent creatures were not simply scaled-up versions of their smaller relatives, but highly specialized giants with unique adaptations for their aerial lifestyle. Their bones were hollow and incredibly light, yet strong enough to support their massive wingspans. They possessed excellent eyesight and could soar for hours without flapping, riding thermals and air currents with the skill of master pilots. Some species had developed specialized feeding strategies, with long, probing beaks for extracting fish from shallow waters, while others were terrestrial stalkers that hunted small dinosaurs and mammals with the patience of herons. The marine realms were equally impressive, dominated by reptiles that had returned to the sea and evolved into forms that would not be out of place in the deepest ocean trenches today. Mosasaurs ruled the waves, growing to lengths of over 50 feet and developing powerful jaws filled with sharp teeth, perfect for catching fish, squid, and even other marine reptiles. These were not primitive crocodile-like creatures, but highly derived marine specialists with flippers instead of legs, shark-like tails for propulsion, and sophisticated sensory systems for hunting in the murky depths. Plesiosaurs had evolved into two distinct forms: the long-necked varieties that used their serpentine necks to strike at fish with lightning speed, and the short-necked pliosaurs that were the apex predators of their time, with skulls larger than those of Tyrannosaurus rex. But perhaps the most remarkable aspect of late Cretaceous dinosaur evolution was not their size or predatory prowess, but their intelligence and social complexity. Evidence suggests that many species had developed sophisticated behaviors that rivaled those of modern mammals and birds. Triceratops lived in herds with complex social hierarchies, caring for their young in communal nurseries and working together to defend against predators. Their elaborate frills and horns were not just weapons, but also display structures used for communication and social recognition. Different species had distinct frill patterns, like heraldic crests, that identified individuals and their status within the group. The hadrosaurs, or duck-billed dinosaurs, had evolved perhaps the most sophisticated communication systems of any dinosaur group. Their hollow crests functioned as resonating chambers, allowing them to produce complex vocalizations that could carry for miles. Different species produced different tones and patterns, creating a prehistoric soundscape filled with haunting calls that echoed across the landscape. Some species could produce sounds at frequencies so low that they traveled through the ground as vibrations, allowing herds to communicate across vast distances, even when visual contact was impossible. Nesting sites from this period reveal the remarkable care that many dinosaur species invested in their young. Maiasaura, the good mother lizard, built elaborate nests in colonial rookeries, bringing food to their hatchlings and protecting them from predators for months after hatching. The nests were carefully constructed with vegetation that would decompose and provide warmth, essentially creating natural incubators that maintained optimal temperatures for the developing eggs. These colonial nesting sites were often used year after year, with multiple generations returning to the same locations to raise their young. The plant life of the late Cretaceous had co-evolved with the dinosaurs, creating intricate relationships that supported the incredible diversity of herbivorous species. The angiosperms, or flowering plants, had undergone their own evolutionary radiation, developing fruits, nuts, and seeds that provided concentrated nutrition for dinosaur herbivores. Trees like magnolias and early oaks created canopy forests, while ferns and cycads filled the understory. The relationship between plants and dinosaurs was so intimate that many plant species had evolved specific defenses against dinosaur browsing, including toxins, thorns, and tough leaves that required specialized digestive systems to process. The smaller dinosaurs of this period were equally remarkable, having evolved into ecological niches that would later be filled by mammals, birds, and other groups. Trudum possessed a brain-to-body ratio that approached that of modern birds, with large eyes adapted for night vision and grasping hands that could manipulate objects with surprising dexterity. These intelligent predators may have used tools, cached food for later consumption, and engaged in complex social behaviors that we are only beginning to understand. The Rhizinosaurus, despite its massive size and fearsome claws, was a herbivore that used its giant talons to strip vegetation from trees, demonstrating the incredible morphological diversity that dinosaurs had achieved. The late Cretaceous world was also remarkable for its global connectivity. Despite the high sea levels that divided continents, dinosaurs managed to disperse across vast distances, with similar species found on different continents. This suggests that they were capable of crossing significant water barriers, either through island hopping or by swimming. The discovery of dinosaur fossils on every continent, including Antarctica, reveals the truly global nature of their success during this period. Climate during the late Cretaceous was not uniform across the globe, but rather showed a complex pattern of regional variations that supported different dinosaur communities. The polar regions, while still warm and ice-free, experienced months of continuous daylight, followed by months of darkness. Dinosaurs living in these regions had to adapt to these extreme seasonal variations, possibly migrating vast distances or developing physiological adaptations to survive the dark polar winters. Evidence suggests that some species may have been capable of limited hibernation or torpor, reducing their metabolic needs during the harshest periods. The volcanic activity that characterized much of the late Cretaceous period was not just a harbinger of doom, but also a driver of evolution and speciation. The ash and gases released by volcanic eruptions created short-term climate fluctuations that challenged dinosaur populations and drove evolutionary innovation. Species that could adapt to these environmental changes thrived, while those that couldn't faced extinction. This constant environmental pressure kept dinosaur evolution dynamic and prevented any single lineage from becoming too specialized or dependent on specific conditions. As the late Cretaceous progressed, the stage was being set for the dramatic finale that would end the age of dinosaurs. The Deccan traps in India were beginning their massive eruptions, slowly poisoning the atmosphere with sulfur dioxide and carbon dioxide. Sea levels were starting to fall, draining the inland seas and reducing the habitat available for many species. Climate was becoming more variable, with greater temperature swings and changing precipitation patterns. Yet the dinosaurs continued to thrive, their communities as complex and diverse as ever, unaware that their 165 million year reign was about to come to an abrupt and catastrophic end. The late Cretaceous represents the pinnacle of dinosaur evolution, a time when these remarkable creatures had achieved a level of sophistication and diversity that would not be seen again until the rise of mammals millions of years later. Their success was built on over 150 million years of evolutionary refinement, creating organisms perfectly adapted to their world. Yet this very success may have made them vulnerable to the catastrophic changes that were about to unfold, as highly specialized organisms often struggle to adapt when their environment changes rapidly and dramatically. The late Cretaceous period was reaching its dramatic crescendo. After more than 165 million years of dominance, the dinosaurs had become the undisputed masters of their world. Yet beneath this apparent triumph, the seeds of their destruction were already being sown. By 70 million years ago, the dinosaur empire had reached unprecedented heights of complexity and sophistication. The great tyrannosaur dynasties ruled the northern continents with an iron fist, their massive frames and bone-crushing jaws making them the apex predators of their time. Tyrannosaurus rex, standing nearly 13 feet tall at the hip and stretching over 40 feet in length, represented the pinnacle of terrestrial predator evolution. These colossal hunters possessed forward-facing eyes for binocular vision, powerful leg muscles for surprising bursts of speed, and teeth the size of railroad spikes designed to puncture bone and tear flesh. But the tyrannosaurs were just one branch of a remarkably diverse dinosaur family tree. The hadrosaurs, or duck-billed dinosaurs, had revolutionized herbivory with their sophisticated dental batteries containing hundreds of grinding teeth. Species like Parasaurolophus and Lambeosaurus sported elaborate crests that functioned as resonating chambers, allowing them to produce haunting calls that could be heard for miles across the ancient landscapes. These vocalizations served multiple purposes, coordinating massive herds, warning of approaching predators, and maintaining social bonds within their complex communities. The ceratopsians had taken defensive evolution to extraordinary lengths. Triceratops, with its massive three-horned skull and protective neck frill, was essentially a living tank weighing up to 12 tons. But even more impressive was their diversity. Dozens of species had evolved different horn configurations and frill decorations, suggesting intense sexual selection and complex social hierarchies. Recent fossil discoveries have revealed that these massive herbivores engaged in head-to-head combat, their reinforced skulls showing healed wounds from territorial battles. Perhaps most remarkable were the ankylosaurs, the armored dinosaurs that had turned defense into an art form. Ankylosaurus itself was a walking fortress, covered in bony armor plates and wielding a massive club tail that could shatter the bones of any predator foolish enough to attack. These creatures had solved the fundamental problem of herbivore survival: how to be too dangerous to eat. The late Cretaceous skies belonged to the pterosaurs, and they had grown to absolutely staggering proportions. Quetzalcoatlus, with a wingspan approaching 35 feet, was the largest flying creature ever to grace the Earth. These aerial giants were not merely oversized bats or birds. They were sophisticated flying machines with complex air sacs, reinforced wing bones, and intricate flight membranes. They soared over vast distances, their keen eyes scanning the landscape below, for carrion and small prey. The marine realm told an equally impressive story of evolutionary innovation. Mosasaurs, the great marine lizards, had grown to lengths exceeding 50 feet and developed powerful swimming adaptations that made them the undisputed rulers of the seas. Their massive skulls, lined with razor-sharp teeth, could crush the shells of the largest ammonites. Meanwhile, long-necked plesiosaurs, like Elasmosaurus, stretched over 40 feet in length, using their serpentine necks to strike at prey with lightning speed. But it was the flowering plants that had perhaps wrought the most profound changes to the late Cretaceous world. The angiosperms had not merely survived, they had exploded into dominance, creating entirely new ecosystems and evolutionary pressures. Forests of primitive magnolias, early oaks, and ancestral palms provided new food sources and habitats. The coevolution between flowering plants and insects had created a complex web of dependencies that supported unprecedented biodiversity. This botanical revolution had cascading effects throughout the entire ecosystem. The new plant communities supported different herbivore populations, which in turn supported different predator assemblages. The chemical compounds produced by flowering plants provided new defensive strategies against herbivory, while also creating new opportunities for creatures that could detoxify or utilize these compounds. The dinosaurs had not remained passive observers of these changes. They had evolved remarkable adaptations to exploit the new ecological niches. Some hadrosaurs developed specialized digestive systems capable of processing the tough, fibrous tissues of flowering plants. Certain theropods became increasingly bird-like, developing feathers not just for display, but for insulation and flight. The boundary between dinosaurs and birds had become increasingly blurred. Social behavior had reached extraordinary levels of complexity. Evidence suggests that many dinosaur species lived in vast, coordinated herds that migrated across continents following seasonal patterns. These migrations rivaled those of modern wildebeest or caribou in scale, with thousands of individuals moving in synchronized waves across the landscape. The logistics of such movements required sophisticated communication systems and social hierarchies. Parental care had evolved far beyond simple nest protection. Many dinosaur species engaged in extended periods of offspring care, with parents teaching young how to forage, avoid predators, and integrate into social groups. Some species built elaborate nests with temperature-controlled incubation chambers, while others engaged in cooperative breeding, where multiple adults cared for communal offspring. The late Cretaceous world was also characterized by remarkable geographic diversity. The breakup of Pangaea had created distinct continental assemblages, each with its own unique dinosaur fauna. South America hosted the massive sauropods like Argentinosaurus and the fearsome abelosaurid predators. Africa was home to the sail-backed Spinosaurus and the massive crocodilomorphs that competed with dinosaurs for aquatic niches. Asia boasted the feathered dinosaurs that were revolutionizing our understanding of the dinosaur-bird transition. Yet beneath this apparent triumph, the late Cretaceous world was becoming increasingly unstable. Volcanic activity was intensifying across the globe, with massive eruptions in what is now India beginning to pump enormous quantities of sulfur dioxide and carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. These Deccan Traps eruptions were among the largest volcanic events in Earth's history, creating lava flows that covered areas the size of modern-day France. The climate was becoming more erratic and extreme. Global temperatures fluctuated wildly, with some periods experiencing greenhouse conditions, while others saw significant cooling. Sea levels rose and fell dramatically, alternately flooding and exposing vast areas of continental margin. These changes put enormous stress on established ecosystems and the species that depended on them. Ocean chemistry was shifting in dangerous ways. The massive volcanic outgassing was acidifying the oceans, making it increasingly difficult for marine organisms to build and maintain calcium carbonate shells and skeletons. The marine food webs that had supported the great marine reptiles were beginning to collapse from the bottom up. On land, the changing climate was fragmenting habitats and disrupting migration routes. The great dinosaur herds found their traditional pathways blocked by new mountain ranges, inland seas, and desert formations. Food sources became less predictable as plant communities shifted in response to changing precipitation patterns and atmospheric chemistry. The dinosaurs' very success may have contributed to their vulnerability. After 165 million years of dominance, they had become highly specialized for specific ecological niches. The massive sauropods required enormous quantities of vegetation and stable climate conditions. The apex predators depended on abundant prey populations. The flying pterosaurs needed predictable air currents and weather patterns. When environmental conditions began to shift rapidly, these specializations became liabilities rather than advantages. Competition was intensifying from unexpected quarters. Early mammals, though still small, were becoming increasingly diverse and sophisticated. Some had evolved specialized diets that put them in direct competition with smaller dinosaurs. Others had developed reproductive strategies that gave them advantages in rapidly changing environments. The stage was being set for a dramatic shift in terrestrial dominance. The late Cretaceous represented both the pinnacle and the swan song of the dinosaur empire. Never before had these remarkable creatures achieved such diversity, complexity, and ecological dominance. Yet the very environmental changes that had driven their evolution to such heights were now conspiring to bring about their downfall. The stage was set for one of the most dramatic extinction events in Earth's history. As we observe the late Cretaceous world in its final moments of glory, we see not just the end of an era, but the culmination of one of evolution's greatest experiments. The dinosaurs had pushed the boundaries of what was possible for terrestrial life, creating ecosystems of unprecedented complexity and beauty. Their legacy would endure not just in the fossil record, but in their direct descendants, the birds, that continue to grace our skies today. The story of the late Cretaceous dinosaurs reminds us that even the most successful evolutionary innovations are not permanent. Dominance in one set of environmental conditions provides no guarantee of survival when those conditions change. The dinosaurs' reign was ending, but their impact on the history of life would prove to be eternal. The catastrophic event that ended the dinosaurs' reign arrived with the force of cosmic violence. Around 66 million years ago, as the late Cretaceous period drew to its close, Earth faced what paleontologists now recognize as one of the most dramatic turning points in the history of life. The culprit was likely an asteroid, perhaps 10 kilometers in diameter, that slammed into our planet with the energy of billions of nuclear weapons. Picture this celestial projectile racing through space at over 20 kilometers per second, carrying with it the fate of an entire world. When it struck what is now the Yucatan Peninsula in Mexico, it created the Chicxulub crater, a scar on Earth's surface spanning 180 kilometers across. The impact itself was merely the opening act of a planetary catastrophe that would unfold over months and years. The immediate aftermath was apocalyptic. The collision vaporized both the asteroid and vast quantities of Earth's crust, hurling billions of tons of debris into the atmosphere. This material, superheated by the impact, rained back down as molten glass spherules, igniting wildfires across entire continents. The skies turned dark as soot and dust blocked out the sun, plunging the planet into what scientists call an impact winter. For creatures that had dominated terrestrial ecosystems for over 160 million years, this sudden environmental collapse proved catastrophic. The dinosaurs, despite their incredible diversity and evolutionary success, found themselves trapped in a world that had turned hostile almost overnight. The very adaptations that had made them so successful became liabilities in this new reality. The darkness that followed the impact was perhaps the most devastating aspect of the extinction event. With sunlight blocked by debris and soot, photosynthesis ground to a halt. Plants began dying en masse, and the intricate food webs that had sustained dinosaur communities for millions of years began collapsing from the bottom up. Herbivorous dinosaurs, many of them giants requiring enormous quantities of vegetation, faced starvation as their food sources withered. The carnivorous dinosaurs, initially perhaps benefiting from the abundance of carrion, soon found themselves in an equally precarious position. As the herbivores died off, the predators lost their primary food sources. Even the most adaptable and intelligent dinosaurs, creatures that had survived previous environmental challenges, could not overcome the sheer scale and speed of this global catastrophe. Temperature fluctuations added another layer of stress to an already impossible situation. The initial impact generated intense heat, followed by the prolonged cooling of the impact winter. Many dinosaur species, particularly the larger ones, lacked the physiological flexibility to cope with such rapid and extreme climate changes. Their metabolism, perfectly tuned for the warm, stable conditions of the Mesozoic, became a fatal weakness in this new world. The extinction was not instantaneous, nor was it uniform across all groups. Some dinosaur lineages may have survived for thousands of years after the initial impact, clinging to existence in scattered refugia. However, the combination of environmental stresses, reduced food availability, and disrupted breeding cycles made recovery impossible for most species. Interestingly, the extinction event was highly selective. While non-avian dinosaurs perished, many other groups survived and even thrived in the post-impact world. Small mammals, having spent the Mesozoic in the shadows of the dinosaurs, suddenly found themselves in a world full of ecological opportunities. Birds, the direct descendants of theropod dinosaurs, managed to survive, perhaps because their small size and ability to fly gave them advantages in finding food and shelter. The selectivity of the extinction reveals important truths about survival during catastrophic events. Size was generally a disadvantage, as larger animals required more food and were less able to find shelter. Dietary flexibility was crucial, with omnivores and scavengers faring better than highly specialized feeders. The ability to exploit underground resources or aquatic environments provided crucial advantages. Some paleontologists argue that the dinosaurs were already in decline before the asteroid impact, weakened by volcanic activity, climate change, and other environmental stresses. The massive volcanic eruptions in what is now India, known as the Deccan Traps, had been spewing lava and toxic gases for thousands of years, potentially compromising dinosaur populations. However, the weight of evidence suggests that while some groups may have been struggling, the dinosaurs as a whole remained diverse and successful right up until the moment of impact. The end of the dinosaurs marked not just the conclusion of the Mesozoic era, but the opening of a new chapter in Earth's history. The Cenozoic era, often called the Age of Mammals, began with a world transformed. The ecological niches once occupied by dinosaurs were gradually filled by mammals, birds, and other surviving groups, leading to the incredible diversity of life we see today. In the aftermath of this great extinction, life on Earth demonstrated its remarkable resilience. Within a few million years, new ecosystems had emerged, new evolutionary experiments had begun, and the planet once again teemed with life. The survivors of the extinction event, including the ancestors of modern mammals, embarked on evolutionary radiations that would eventually produce whales, elephants, primates, and countless other species. The story of the dinosaurs' extinction serves as both a testament to life's fragility and its incredible resilience. These magnificent creatures, which had ruled the Earth for longer than any other group of large animals, were brought low by a chance encounter with a space rock. Yet their legacy lives on, not just in the fossil record, but in the birds that soar through our skies today, carrying within their genes the evolutionary heritage of the mighty dinosaurs. As we reflect on this ancient catastrophe, we are reminded of our own planet's vulnerability and the preciousness of the life that surrounds us. The dinosaurs' story is ultimately one of both triumph and tragedy, of evolutionary success and sudden loss, of the eternal dance between life and the forces that shape our world. In understanding their rise and fall, we gain not only knowledge of the past, but wisdom for navigating our own uncertain future on this remarkable planet we call home. As we journey through the final chapter of our cosmic voyage, we find ourselves at the moment when the age of dinosaurs begins to fade into the twilight of deep time. The mighty rulers of the Mesozoic had governed Earth for over 160 million years, but their reign was approaching its end through a convergence of forces that would forever reshape our planet's destiny. The late Cretaceous period, roughly 100 to 66 million years ago, witnessed the dinosaurs at both their greatest triumph and their most vulnerable moment. They had diversified into forms more spectacular than ever before. Massive sauropods like Argentinosaurus stretched over 100 feet in length, their necks reaching toward the canopy of flowering plants that now dominated the landscape. Fearsome predators like Tyrannosaurus rex and Giganotosaurus ruled as apex hunters, their bone-crushing jaws capable of delivering bites with forces exceeding 12,000 pounds per square inch. In the skies, pterosaurs had evolved into giants like Quetzalcoatlus, with wingspans rivaling small aircraft, while in the oceans, marine reptiles like Mosasaurus patrolled the depths as living sea monsters. Yet beneath this apparent success, the foundations of the dinosaurian world were beginning to shift. The very innovations that had made dinosaurs so successful were becoming liabilities in a rapidly changing world. Their large body sizes, which had allowed them to dominate ecosystems and access resources unavailable to smaller creatures, now required enormous amounts of food and energy. Their specialized adaptations, honed over millions of years of evolution, made them less flexible when faced with environmental upheaval. The Earth itself was transforming in ways that would challenge even the most adaptable species. The supercontinent Pangaea, which had been breaking apart throughout the Mesozoic, continued its inexorable drift toward the modern continental configuration. This tectonic activity triggered massive volcanic eruptions, particularly in what is now India, where the Deccan Traps poured forth lava flows that covered an area larger than modern France. These eruptions didn't occur in sudden catastrophic bursts, but rather as a prolonged period of volcanic activity that lasted for millions of years, gradually poisoning the atmosphere with sulfur compounds and carbon dioxide. The climate, which had remained relatively stable and warm throughout much of the Mesozoic, began to fluctuate more dramatically. Sea levels, which had been among the highest in Earth's history during the mid-Cretaceous, started to drop as the planet entered a cooling phase. This regression exposed vast areas of shallow seas, eliminating the marine habitats that had supported diverse ecosystems of marine reptiles, ammonites, and countless species of fish and invertebrates. Perhaps most significantly, the rise of flowering plants, or angiosperms, was revolutionizing terrestrial ecosystems in ways that would ultimately favor smaller, more adaptable creatures. These plants, with their efficient reproduction strategies and diverse chemical defenses, began to outcompete the conifers and ferns that had dominated Mesozoic landscapes. The coevolution between flowering plants and insects created new ecological niches that were better suited to small, warm-blooded creatures than to the giant reptiles that had ruled for so long. Mammals, which had existed alongside dinosaurs throughout the Mesozoic, as small nocturnal creatures were beginning to diversify and exploit these new opportunities. Though still modest in size compared to their dinosaurian contemporaries, these early mammals possessed several advantages that would prove crucial in the changing world. Their warm-blooded metabolism allowed them to remain active in cooler temperatures. Their small size meant they required less food and could shelter in burrows or dense vegetation, and their more flexible reproductive strategies enabled them to recover more quickly from population crashes. Birds, the direct descendants of theropod dinosaurs, were also expanding their ecological roles. Having mastered powered flight, they could access resources and habitats unavailable to their earthbound relatives. Their efficient respiratory systems and warm-blooded metabolism made them well-suited to exploit the changing climate, while their relatively small size meant they could survive on resources that would be insufficient for larger dinosaurs. The stage was set for catastrophe, but the final act would come not from the gradual environmental changes that had been building for millions of years, but from a cosmic accident that would occur in a matter of moments. Somewhere in the asteroid belt between Mars and Jupiter, gravitational perturbations nudged a chunk of rock and metal, perhaps 6 miles in diameter, onto a collision course with Earth. This asteroid, composed primarily of iridium-rich materials rare on our planet's surface, hurtled through space at speeds exceeding 40,000 miles per hour, carrying with it the kinetic energy equivalent to billions of nuclear weapons. The impact occurred 66 million years ago in what is now the Yucatan Peninsula of Mexico, creating the Chicxulub crater, a scar in the Earth's surface over 100 miles in diameter. The collision released energy beyond human comprehension, instantly vaporizing the asteroid and vast quantities of rock from the impact site. The explosion sent shockwaves racing around the globe, triggering earthquakes and volcanic eruptions thousands of miles away. Molten rock and debris were hurled into the atmosphere, some escaping Earth's gravity entirely, while other fragments rained down across the planet like a hellish meteor shower. The immediate aftermath was apocalyptic. The impact generated a fireball that briefly outshone the sun, igniting global wildfires that turned vast forests into infernos. The atmosphere filled with smoke, ash, and microscopic particles that blocked sunlight for months, or possibly years. This impact winter plunged the planet into darkness and cold, causing temperatures to plummet and photosynthesis to cease. Plants died in massive numbers, and the food webs that had supported the dinosaurs collapsed. But the catastrophe was not uniform in its effects. The asteroid's impact occurred in a shallow tropical sea, vaporizing massive amounts of sulfur-rich rock and creating acid rain that further poisoned the environment. The location of the impact meant that some regions of the Earth were devastated immediately, while others experienced the effects more gradually. The size of organisms became a crucial factor in survival. Smaller creatures required less food and could shelter more effectively, while larger animals found themselves unable to meet their enormous energy requirements in the devastated landscape. The extinction was neither instantaneous nor complete. Some dinosaur species may have survived for thousands of years after the impact, clinging to existence in isolated refugia, where conditions remained marginally habitable. The process of extinction was likely gradual and patchy, with different species disappearing at different times and rates. But the overall pattern was clear. The age of giant reptiles was ending, and a new chapter in Earth's history was beginning. Yet the story of the dinosaurs' fall is not simply one of destruction and loss. It is also a story of survival, adaptation, and transformation. The birds that soared through the post-impact skies carried within their DNA the genetic legacy of their dinosaurian ancestors. They had inherited the efficient respiratory systems, the sophisticated behaviors, and the remarkable adaptability that had made dinosaurs successful for so long. In a very real sense, dinosaurs never went extinct. They simply transformed, trading their terrestrial dominance for mastery of the skies. The mammals that emerged from their burrows and tree hollows to inherit the empty landscapes carried their own legacy of survival. Having lived alongside dinosaurs for over 150 million years, they had learned to be resourceful, adaptable, and opportunistic. These qualities, honed by millions of years of living in the shadows of giants, would serve them well as they diversified to fill the ecological niches left vacant by the dinosaurs' demise. As we reach the end of our journey through the rise and fall of the dinosaurs, we are left with a profound appreciation for the complexity and fragility of life on Earth. The dinosaurs' story reminds us that even the most successful and dominant groups of organisms are not immune to the forces of change. Their reign, though lasting for over 160 million years, was ultimately temporary, a chapter in the much longer story of life's evolution on our planet. The fall of the dinosaurs opened new possibilities for life on Earth, paving the way for the age of mammals and ultimately for the emergence of our own species. We are part of the continuing story that began with those first archosaurs in the Triassic period, inheritors of a world shaped by the rise and fall of the dinosaurs. Their legacy lives on not only in the birds that fill our skies, but in the very processes of evolution, adaptation, and survival that continue to shape life on Earth today. The dinosaurs' story is our story too, a reminder that life finds a way to persist, adapt, and flourish even in the face of seemingly insurmountable challenges. As we face our own environmental changes and uncertainties, we can draw inspiration from the resilience and adaptability that characterize these remarkable creatures throughout their long reign. The dance of life continues, and we are privileged to be part of its ongoing performance. The extinction of the non-avian dinosaurs 66 million years ago was not a swift, clean ending to their reign. It was a prolonged death, a gradual collapse that unfolded over hundreds of thousands of years as the planet's life support systems broke down one by one. The asteroid impact at Chicxulub was merely the final blow in what had already become a precarious balancing act between survival and extinction. By the late Cretaceous, the dinosaurs had achieved something remarkable. They had not just survived for over 160 million years, they had thrived, diversified, and dominated virtually every ecological niche on Earth. From the massive titanosaurs that grazed on flowering plants, to the pack-hunting dromaeosaurs that pursued their prey with intelligence and coordination, dinosaurs had written the most successful chapter in the history of complex life on our planet. Yet success in the natural world can sometimes plant the seeds of vulnerability. The very specialization that had allowed dinosaurs to exploit every corner of their environment also made them increasingly dependent on stable conditions. The massive sauropods required enormous quantities of vegetation to sustain their bulk. The apex predators needed healthy populations of prey animals. The elaborate social structures and nesting behaviors that had evolved over millions of years depended on predictable seasonal patterns and stable climates. The Earth of 66 million years ago was already showing signs of strain. Massive volcanic eruptions in what is now India were pumping sulfur compounds and carbon dioxide into the atmosphere, creating acid rain and gradual climate shifts. Sea levels were fluctuating, changing the geography of coastlines and inland seas. The very flowering plants that had enabled the diversification of herbivorous dinosaurs were still relatively new additions to Earth's ecosystems, creating complex but potentially fragile food webs. Competition was intensifying as well. Small mammals, no longer content to remain in the shadows, were becoming increasingly diverse and adaptable. Some had learned to raid dinosaur nests, others to exploit food sources that dinosaurs couldn't access. Birds, themselves dinosaurs, were beginning to outcompete their terrestrial relatives in certain niches. The oceans were dominated by massive marine reptiles, but these too were facing pressure from changing chemistry and temperature. When the asteroid struck, it found a world already walking a tightrope. The impact itself was devastating beyond comprehension. The explosion released energy equivalent to billions of nuclear weapons, instantly vaporizing rock and sending debris rocketing into space. But it was the cascade of secondary effects that truly sealed the fate of the dinosaurs. The debris that fell back to Earth heated the atmosphere to furnace-like temperatures, igniting wildfires across entire continents. The skies darkened with dust and soot, blocking out the sun for months or perhaps years. Without sunlight, photosynthesis ground to a halt. Plants withered and died, from the tiniest algae in the oceans to the mighty conifers and flowering plants that had sustained the dinosaurs. The collapse began at the bottom of the food web and worked its way up with merciless efficiency. Herbivorous dinosaurs, deprived of their food sources, began to starve. The massive sauropods, with their enormous energy requirements, were among the first to succumb. As the herbivores died, the carnivores that depended on them followed. Even the most adaptable predators found themselves in a world suddenly empty of prey. The marine ecosystems collapsed just as dramatically. The microscopic plankton that form the base of oceanic food webs died in massive numbers, their calcium carbonate shells dissolving in increasingly acidic seas. The great marine reptiles, the mosasaurs and plesiosaurs that had ruled the oceans, found themselves without food in waters that were becoming toxic. Yet even in this apocalyptic scenario, the story of the dinosaurs did not end entirely. Some lineages had already taken to the skies, evolving into birds that could migrate vast distances in search of food and shelter. These avian dinosaurs possessed advantages that their terrestrial relatives lacked. They could fly over devastated landscapes to find pockets of survival. They required less food due to their smaller size, and many had already adapted to eating seeds and other plant materials that could survive in dormant states. The extinction was not instantaneous. For decades, perhaps centuries after the impact, isolated populations of dinosaurs may have clung to life in remote corners of the world. Fossil evidence suggests that some species survived longer than others, eking out existence in a world that was slowly, inexorably becoming uninhabitable for large terrestrial animals. The mammals that inherited the Earth were not necessarily superior to the dinosaurs. They were simply better suited to the post-impact world. Their smaller size meant they needed less food. Their ability to regulate their body temperature internally gave them an advantage in a world of temperature extremes. Many could burrow underground, sheltering from the harsh conditions on the surface. Some had already evolved to eat seeds, insects, and other food sources that remained available even after the collapse of the major ecosystems. In the aftermath of the extinction, the surviving mammals began to diversify with remarkable speed. Within a few million years, they had evolved into forms that occupied many of the ecological niches once held by dinosaurs. Some became large herbivores, others swift predators. The age of mammals had begun. But the dinosaurs had not truly disappeared. Every morning when birds take flight, every time a chicken pecks at seeds in a farmyard, every migration of swallows across continents, we witness the continuation of the dinosaur lineage. The birds carry within their bones and DNA the legacy of their ancient ancestors, a living reminder that extinction is not always complete, that life finds ways to persist even through the most catastrophic events. The story of the dinosaurs' extinction teaches us about the fragility of even the most successful life forms. It reminds us that dominance in the natural world is always temporary, that the very adaptations that ensure survival in one era can become liabilities in another. The dinosaurs ruled the Earth for over 160 million years. but they could not survive the rapid changes that followed the Chicxulub impact. Yet their legacy extends far beyond their own survival. The dinosaurs shaped the world we inhabit today. Their evolution drove the diversification of flowering plants, which now dominate terrestrial ecosystems. Their extinction created opportunities for mammalian evolution that eventually led to our own species. The fossil fuels we burn today are partly composed of organic matter from the Mesozoic era, when dinosaurs were the dominant form of life on Earth. The rise and fall of the dinosaurs represents one of evolution's grandest experiments. For over 160 million years, they demonstrated that life could achieve extraordinary diversity and complexity. They proved that animals could grow to enormous sizes, develop sophisticated social behaviors, and adapt to virtually every environment on Earth. Their extinction reminds us that even the most successful evolutionary experiments can come to an end. But their legacy lives on in the continuing story of life on our planet. As we face our own environmental challenges today, the story of the dinosaurs offers both warning and hope. It warns us that dominant species can face extinction when environmental conditions change too rapidly for adaptation to keep pace. But it also shows us that life itself is remarkably resilient, that new forms can emerge from the ashes of the old, and that the story of evolution continues to unfold in ways that can surprise and inspire us. The dinosaurs may have fallen, but their story is far from over. Every time we look up at the sky and see birds in flight, we are witnessing the continuation of a lineage that has survived for over 230 million years. In the grace of a soaring eagle, the intelligence of a crow, the endurance of a migrating goose, we see the living legacy of the dinosaurs, adapted and transformed, but still carrying forward the ancient spark of life that first emerged in the Triassic dawn. The story we've told together has been one of cosmic evolution and gravitational choreography, but now we arrive at the most sobering chapter in our dinosaur saga. After 165 million years of unprecedented success, after conquering every conceivable environment from polar forests to equatorial deserts, after evolving into forms both magnificent and bizarre, the non-avian dinosaurs face their final curtain call. The late Cretaceous period, roughly 100 to 66 million years ago, represented both the pinnacle and the prelude to catastrophe for dinosaur civilization. Never before had Earth witnessed such a spectacular array of dinosaurian life. Massive titanosaurs stretched their necks toward the canopy in South American forests, while armored ankylosaurs grazed peacefully in the fern meadows of North America. Towering tyrannosaurs stalked through the woodlands of Asia, their keen intelligence and social hunting strategies making them apex predators of unparalleled efficiency. Yet beneath this veneer of success, cracks were beginning to show in the foundation of dinosaur dominance. The world was changing in ways both subtle and profound, and these changes would ultimately prove insurmountable for creatures that had ruled the planet for longer than mammals have existed. Climate fluctuations became increasingly erratic during the late Cretaceous. The greenhouse world that had nurtured dinosaur diversification began to cool irregularly, creating temperature swings that stressed ecosystems across the globe. Sea levels rose and fell with increasing frequency, fragmenting habitats and forcing migrations that many species couldn't complete successfully. The stable, predictable world that had allowed dinosaurs to fine-tune their adaptations over millions of years was becoming chaotic and unpredictable. Volcanic activity intensified dramatically during this period, particularly in what is now India, where the Deccan Traps erupted with unprecedented violence. These weren't merely local disasters, but global catastrophes that pumped enormous quantities of sulfur dioxide, carbon dioxide, and toxic gases into the atmosphere. The resulting acid rain poisoned freshwater systems, while volcanic ash blocked sunlight, and disrupted photosynthesis across vast regions. Plant communities that had supported dinosaur food webs for millions of years began to collapse under this chemical assault. The rise of flowering plants, initially a boon for dinosaur diversity, eventually became another source of stress. These new plants produced different types of toxins and defensive compounds than the conifers and ferns that dinosaurs had co-evolved with. Herbivorous dinosaurs found themselves struggling to digest these new food sources efficiently, while the rapid evolution of flowering plants created boom and bust cycles in plant productivity that made food availability increasingly unreliable. Perhaps most significantly, the specialized adaptations that had made dinosaurs so successful began to work against them as environmental conditions shifted. The massive size that had allowed sauropods to access high vegetation became a liability when food became scarce. The complex social structures that had enabled pack hunting in tyrannosaurs became difficult to maintain when prey populations crashed. The intricate feather displays and elaborate courtship rituals that had driven sexual selection became energetically expensive luxuries that stressed populations could no longer afford. Disease outbreaks, facilitated by the stress of environmental change, swept through dinosaur populations with devastating efficiency. Their social behaviors, which had been such an advantage during stable times, now became vectors for rapid disease transmission. Archaeological evidence suggests that many dinosaur species were already in decline by the time the final catastrophe struck, their populations fragmented and vulnerable after millions of years of mounting environmental pressure. The fossil record from the latest Cretaceous tells a story of increasing ecological instability. Food webs that had remained stable for tens of millions of years began to unravel as key species disappeared. The disappearance of certain plant species cascaded through the ecosystem, eliminating the herbivores that depended on them and subsequently the carnivores that hunted those herbivores. Biodiversity, which had reached its peak earlier in the Cretaceous, began to decline as environmental stress eliminated the more specialized species first. Regional extinctions became increasingly common as local ecosystems collapsed under the combined pressure of climate change, volcanism, and disease. What had once been a global dinosaur empire began to fragment into isolated populations, struggling to survive in increasingly hostile environments. The great dinosaur highways that had allowed species to migrate across continents became broken and impassable as sea levels rose and habitats shifted. Even their remarkable adaptability, which had served dinosaurs so well throughout their evolutionary history, began to fail them as the pace of environmental change accelerated beyond their ability to adapt. Evolution, which had crafted such elegant solutions to environmental challenges over millions of years, simply couldn't keep pace with the rapid changes occurring in the late Cretaceous world. The stage was set for catastrophe. When the final blow came, it struck a dinosaur world already weakened by millions of years of mounting stress. The great extinction that would end the age of dinosaurs wasn't merely the result of a single catastrophic event, but the culmination of a long decline that had been building throughout the late Cretaceous period. The mighty dinosaurs, masters of adaptation and survival, had finally encountered challenges that exceeded even their remarkable capacity for evolutionary innovation. As we prepare to witness the final chapter of this extraordinary story, we must remember that the dinosaurs' decline doesn't diminish their achievement. For 165 million years, they had ruled the Earth with a success unmatched by any other group of land animals. Their legacy would live on in their avian descendants, carrying forward the innovations and adaptations that had made them the most successful vertebrates in Earth's history. The end was approaching, but the story of dinosaur ingenuity and resilience would continue in new forms, forever changing the trajectory of life on our planet. The asteroid impact at Chicxulub represents one of the most dramatic turning points in Earth's history, but it was not the sudden executioner of the dinosaurs that popular imagination often depicts. Instead, it delivered the final blow to creatures already weakened by a cascade of environmental pressures that had been building for millions of years. The impact itself unleashed forces beyond comprehension, as a 6-mile-wide asteroid struck the Yucatan Peninsula with the energy of billions of nuclear weapons, instantly vaporizing rock and sending shockwaves around the globe. The immediate aftermath was apocalyptic. Superheated debris rained down across continents, igniting wildfires that consumed vast forests and grasslands. The impact ejected so much pulverized rock and dust into the atmosphere that it blocked sunlight for months, plunging the planet into a dark, cold winter that halted photosynthesis and collapsed food webs from the bottom up. Acid rain fell from skies choked with sulfur compounds, poisoning freshwater systems and further devastating plant life. The oceans, already stressed by volcanic activity and climate change, experienced massive die-offs as marine ecosystems collapsed under the weight of darkness, cold, and chemical contamination. For the dinosaurs, this represented an impossible challenge. Large predators, like Tyrannosaurus rex, already struggling with declining prey populations, found themselves in a world where their massive energy requirements could no longer be met. The complex social structures and territorial behaviors that had evolved over millions of years became meaningless in a landscape stripped of resources. Herbivorous giants like Triceratops and Edmontosaurus watched their food sources wither and die, their sophisticated dental adaptations useless against the barren wasteland that replaced lush Cretaceous vegetation. Yet even in this darkest hour, life found ways to persist. The dinosaurs' greatest evolutionary achievement, their conquest of the skies through birds, proved to be their salvation. Small, adaptable, and capable of flight, early birds could search vast areas for scattered food sources, exploit new ecological niches, and survive on minimal resources. Their feathers, originally evolved for display and temperature regulation, now provided crucial insulation in the post-impact cold. Their efficient respiratory systems and rapid metabolisms, inherited from their theropod ancestors, allowed them to thrive where other creatures failed. The mammalian survivors of the extinction event were predominantly small, generalized creatures that could exploit the chaos of the post-impact world. Tiny insectivores scurried through the debris, feeding on the insects and other invertebrates that formed the foundation of recovery ecosystems. Omnivorous mammals found opportunities in the abundance of seeds, nuts, and organic matter that accumulated in the devastated landscape. Their ability to regulate body temperature internally proved invaluable in the unstable climate of the early Paleocene, while their smaller size and lower energy requirements made them less vulnerable to resource scarcity. The extinction event created a world of empty niches and new opportunities. Without the dominance of large dinosaurs, mammals began to experiment with ecological roles that had been closed to them for over 150 million years. The first large mammalian herbivores appeared within a few million years of the impact, evolving from small, generalized ancestors to fill the void left by sauropods and hadrosaurs. Predatory mammals grew larger and more specialized, developing the sophisticated hunting strategies that would eventually produce the great cats, wolves, and other apex predators of the Cenozoic era. The recovery was not uniform across the globe. Some regions, particularly those closer to the impact site, remained barren for millions of years, while others began showing signs of ecological renewal within centuries. The pattern of recovery was largely determined by local geography, climate, and the survival of key species that could serve as the foundation for new ecosystems. In many areas, ferns were among the first plants to recolonize the landscape, their spores having survived the impact winter in soil and sediment. These fern spikes, visible in the fossil record, mark the beginning of ecological recovery. and the slow rebuilding of terrestrial ecosystems. The marine realm experienced its own dramatic transformation. The extinction of ammonites, marine reptiles, and many other groups opened new evolutionary pathways for surviving lineages. Fish diversified rapidly in the aftermath, while marine mammals would eventually colonize the oceans in a spectacular adaptive radiation. The collapse of Cretaceous marine ecosystems paved the way for the evolution of modern ocean food webs, with new types of plankton, fish, and marine invertebrates establishing the foundation for Cenozoic marine life. Perhaps most remarkably, the extinction event that ended the age of dinosaurs also set the stage for the rise of intelligence on Earth. The small mammals that survived the impact possessed relatively large brains for their body size, a characteristic that would prove increasingly important in the complex post-extinction world. The evolutionary pressures of the early Cenozoic, including rapid environmental change, new predator-prey relationships, and the need to exploit novel food sources, favored animals with enhanced cognitive abilities and behavioral flexibility. The legacy of the dinosaurs extends far beyond their dramatic extinction. Their innovations in respiration, metabolism, reproduction, and social behavior laid the groundwork for many of the features we see in modern birds and mammals. The hollow bones and air sacs that made gigantic sauropods possible also enabled the evolution of flight in birds. The sophisticated parental care behaviors of dinosaurs provided a template for the complex social structures of mammals. Even their extinction created opportunities that shaped the subsequent evolution of life on Earth. In the end, the story of the dinosaurs is not merely one of rise and fall, but of transformation and continuity. Every dawn chorus of birdsong carries echoes of Jurassic forests. Every flight of migrating geese traces pathways first established by pterosaurs, and every breath we take uses respiratory innovations perfected by theropod dinosaurs. The age of dinosaurs may have ended 66 million years ago, but their evolutionary legacy continues to shape the living world around us, reminding us that extinction is not always an ending, but sometimes a beginning in disguise. The legacy of giants, understanding our place in deep time. As we reach the final chapter of our journey through the age of dinosaurs, we find ourselves standing at a profound threshold of understanding. The story we've traced together, from the first tentative steps of early archosaurs through the magnificent diversity of the Mesozoic era to the catastrophic end that reshaped our planet, is more than just a tale of ancient creatures. It's a meditation on time itself, on the nature of dominance and vulnerability, and on the delicate threads that connect all life across the vast tapestry of Earth's history. The dinosaurs ruled our planet for an almost incomprehensible span of time. When we try to grasp the full scope of their reign, 165 million years, our minds struggle with the sheer magnitude. To put this in perspective, if Earth's entire history were compressed into a single year, dinosaurs would have dominated the landscape for nearly 2 weeks straight. Humans, by contrast, would appear only in the final few seconds before midnight on December 31st. This humbling comparison reminds us that our species, for all our technological prowess and planetary influence, represents but a fleeting moment in the grand chronicle of life on Earth. Yet within that fleeting moment, we've accomplished something remarkable. We've developed the tools and wisdom to look back across the abyss of deep time and reconstruct the lives of creatures that vanished 66 million years before our species even existed. Through careful excavation of fossilized bones, analysis of ancient pollen, and study of rock layers laid down grain by grain across millions of years, we've brought the dinosaurs back to life in our minds. We've learned to see them not as the sluggish, cold-blooded monsters of early imagination, but as the dynamic, diverse, and often surprisingly sophisticated animals they truly were. The picture that emerges from modern paleontology is one of breathtaking complexity. We've discovered that many dinosaurs were likely warm-blooded, with metabolisms that rivaled or exceeded those of modern mammals. We found evidence of elaborate parental care, with some species tending their nests and feeding their young with the same dedication we see in today's birds. We've uncovered fossils that preserve not just bones, but also skin, feathers, and even the contents of dinosaur stomachs, giving us intimate glimpses into their daily lives. Perhaps most remarkably, we've learned that dinosaurs didn't actually disappear entirely. Every morning, when we hear the song of a robin or watch a hawk soar overhead, we're witnessing living dinosaurs, the direct descendants of those magnificent creatures that once shook the ground with their footsteps. Birds represent one of evolution's most successful experiments, having diversified into nearly 10,000 species that inhabit every corner of our planet. In their hollow bones, their efficient respiratory systems, and their complex social behaviors, we can still see echoes of their ancient heritage. The story of dinosaurian success contains profound lessons about adaptation and resilience. These creatures thrived through dramatic changes in climate, survived the breakup of supercontinents, and evolved remarkable innovations that allowed them to exploit virtually every available ecological niche. They gave us the first powered flight, the largest land animals ever to walk the earth, and some of the most sophisticated hunting strategies in the fossil record. Their success was built on a foundation of evolutionary flexibility, the ability to adapt, diversify, and find new solutions to environmental challenges. But their story also carries a sobering message about the fragility of even the most successful lineages. The asteroid impact that ended the Cretaceous period was, by most measures, a cosmic accident, a chance collision between Earth and a chunk of rock that happened to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. Yet this single event was sufficient to topple an empire that had endured for 165 million years. It reminds us that catastrophe can strike without warning, that even the mightiest creatures are vulnerable to forces beyond their control. The extinction event that ended the dinosaurs' reign was not just an ending, however. It was also a beginning. The ecological vacuum left by their disappearance created opportunities for other lineages to flourish. Mammals, which had lived in the shadows of dinosaurs for most of the Mesozoic era, suddenly found themselves in a world of unprecedented opportunity. They rapidly diversified to fill the empty niches, eventually giving rise to the rich mammalian fauna we see today, including our own lineage. This pattern of extinction and renewal has played out repeatedly throughout Earth's history. Each mass extinction event, while devastating in its immediate effects, has also spurred waves of evolutionary innovation. The end Permian extinction that preceded the dinosaurs' rise eliminated the dominant reptilian groups of the Paleozoic era, creating the conditions that allowed dinosaurs to flourish. The end Cretaceous extinction that ended their reign opened the door for the age of mammals. These great turnovers remind us that life on Earth is not a steady progression toward greater complexity, but rather a series of experiments, some successful, some not, each building upon the foundations laid by those that came before. As we contemplate the legacy of the dinosaurs, we're inevitably drawn to consider our own place in this ongoing story. Humans have achieved a form of dominance over Earth's ecosystems that is unprecedented in the planet's history. Our influence extends to every corner of the globe, from the deepest ocean trenches to the highest mountain peaks. We've altered the chemistry of the atmosphere, redirected the flow of rivers, and driven countless species to extinction. In geological terms, our impact has been so profound that many scientists now argue we've entered a new epoch, the Anthropocene, or Age of Humans. Yet the dinosaurs' story reminds us that dominance is always temporary. No matter how successful, how widespread, or how well adapted a group becomes, it remains vulnerable to the unexpected catastrophe, the gradual environmental shift, or the rise of competitors. The dinosaurs' 165 million year reign seemed invincible until it wasn't. Their story teaches us humility and urgency in equal measure. Humility about our place in the grand sweep of Earth's history, and urgency about the responsibility that comes with our current dominance. The asteroid impact that ended the Cretaceous period offers a particularly relevant lesson for our modern world. That ancient catastrophe was, fundamentally, a climate change event. A sudden, dramatic alteration in global environmental conditions that exceeded the adaptive capacity of most large animals. Today, we face our own climate crisis, driven not by an asteroid impact, but by our own activities. The greenhouse gases we've pumped into the atmosphere, the forests we've cleared, and the ecosystems we've disrupted are creating environmental changes that rival those of the great extinction events of the past. The dinosaurs couldn't prevent the asteroid that sealed their fate, but we have the knowledge and, potentially, the technology to address the environmental challenges we face. The question is whether we'll choose to use that knowledge wisely. The paleontological record suggests that species and ecosystems are remarkably resilient when given the chance to adapt gradually to changing conditions. But it also shows that rapid, dramatic environmental changes can overwhelm even the most successful lineages. As we look toward the future, the dinosaurs' legacy offers both warning and inspiration. Their story warns us that no dominance is permanent, that catastrophe can strike without warning, and that even the most successful adaptations can become liabilities when conditions change rapidly. But it also inspires us with examples of remarkable resilience, innovative solutions to environmental challenges, and the potential for life to recover and diversify, even after the most devastating setbacks. The birds that sing outside our windows carry within their genes the legacy of creatures that walked with tyrannosaurs and watched the rise and fall of ancient mountain ranges. They represent an unbroken chain of life that stretches back through deep time, connecting us to the deep history of our planet. In their flight, we see the triumph of innovation over adversity. In their songs, we hear echoes of ancient voices that once filled Mesozoic forests. Perhaps most importantly, the dinosaurs' story reminds us that we are part of something much larger than ourselves, a planetary experiment in life that has been running for nearly 4 billion years. We are not separate from nature, but deeply embedded within it, sharing common ancestors with every other living thing on Earth. The carbon in our bodies was once part of Cretaceous ferns. The calcium in our bones was once part of ancient seashells. And the oxygen we breathe was once exhaled by dinosaurs walking through prehistoric forests. This connection across deep time gives us both perspective and responsibility. We are the current custodians of a planet that has seen the rise and fall of countless dominant groups, the formation and erosion of mountain ranges, the opening and closing of ocean basins. We are the inheritors of a history written in stone, a story told in fossils, a legacy that stretches back to the very origins of life itself. The dinosaurs ruled the Earth for 165 million years before yielding to forces beyond their control. Their story is now written in the rocks, preserved in museums, and carried forward in the genes of their avian descendants. What story will we write in our time? What legacy will we leave for the species that come after us? The answers to these questions will determine not just our own fate, but the fate of the countless other species that share our planet. As we conclude this journey through the age of dinosaurs, we carry with us the wisdom of deep time, the understanding that we are part of a story much larger than ourselves, the humility that comes from recognizing our place in the grand sweep of Earth's history, and the responsibility that comes with being the current dominant species on a planet that has seen so many rise and fall before us. The dinosaurs' reign has ended, but their legacy continues, in the birds that soar overhead, in the fossils that tell their story, and in the lessons they teach us about life, adaptation, and the precious fragility of our shared home in the cosmos. And just like that, the age of dinosaurs ended, but their legacy never truly disappeared. In birdsong, in fossils, and in the layers of rock beneath our feet, their story still echoes. Thank you for spending this time with me, and with them. I hope this journey brought you wonder, calm, and maybe even a little peace. Until our next adventure, I wish you very good night. Sleep well. This is Boring Science signing off. Cheers.